in the finale, knowing that we were that Loki he's learnt to control the time slipping. And I think the last line of episode 5 is, I can rewrite the story. It's almost like he's redrafting it. He's redrafting reality every time, choosing to go back. Okay, and then failing and failing and failing again. It's kind of like that Samuel Beckett quote, ever tried, ever failed, fail again, fail better.
My name is Erik Davis, and I'll be real with you. Like, I'm super excited for this one. I'm a big Marvel nerd. I've been watching and covering Marvel Studios since the beginning, since 2008's Iron Man. I have watched all of it multiple times, and I can say without a doubt, I have been most impressed with the character Loki. Not just in the wildly entertaining journey he's taken us on for over 10 years now, but more so in the performance of one Tom Hiddleston, who has just been so dynamic. He has just given us incredible range, delivering multiple iterations of this character. He is a great villain, a great hero, a friend, a mentor, a trickster, a loyal brother, a not so loyal brother. He's just given us all of it. And I am relieved to tell you and to confirm today that he will not be time slipping during this conversation. We got him the whole time. He's going to be here. But no, seriously, I am beyond honored to be here. And without further ado, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce the star of Loki himself, Tom Hiddleston.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me? Is this on?
This is on.
Good evening, everybody.
Does it feel good to be in front of a crowd?
It's absolutely extraordinary. Standing on a stage in New York City on a Sunday evening in front of all of you. It's wonderful. Thank you for coming to watch the show and to listen to me. Yeah.
And me. First of all.
And thank you, Erik, for that extraordinary intro.
Of course,
really,
man.
Yeah.
You deserve it.
Thank you.
And more
so
so.
Sweet.
And I'm gonna keep going here. I don't remember a character played by an actor for over a decade across movies and television that has been as entertaining, as inspiring, as memorable, as thought-provoking as Loki and your portrayal of Loki. I feel like it is a historic achievement. And so I just wanted to start off by just congratulating you, my man, on just a tremendous run here.
That is so kind of you. That's so very sweet of you. I am supported by at least 2 or 3 millennia of storytelling. Loki's a character who's been around for a really long time in human consciousness. So there was a lot for me to draw on. I mean, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. I was going to say frost giants, but I really am. Loki's such a brilliant creation of collective human imagination. The trickster exists in mythology, in many different mythologies, as a necessary chaotic element. The trickster is designed as a disruptor, as a boundary crosser, as a shapeshifter. And if you look in any mythology, there's always a character like Loki somewhere. And in Norse mythology, obviously, he's incarnated as Loki. And Stan Lee and Jack Kirby were very smart, and they could see the potential of the character in there as they were beginning to create the pantheon of Marvel characters. So it's just been such a privilege for me to take on this deeply rich material, because the character himself is so interesting, has so much range, has so much complexity and depth, and I feel very fortunate that I've been able to play him for as long as I have, and in different iterations. Loki will be around in human imagination much, much longer than I will. So,
You know, I actually want to go back to the start. I like to start at the start. And I mean, do you still remember the day that you got the role of Loki? And in that moment, what were your first impressions of this role? What did you think it was going to be?
you know, I do remember exactly when I was cast. It was like a spring day in London. I was in Kentish Town, and I got a call about 5 p.m. UK time, which would have been 9 a.m. in Los Angeles, I think. And it was Kenneth Branagh and Kevin Feige on the phone together. I thought, okay. And they said they said very quickly, how are you doing? I hope you're well. We would love to offer you the role of Loki in Thor. And I was just speechless for a second. I said, oh my God. And was just felt completely giddy. And then I hung up, thanked them both. Sincerely, I felt so grateful, so honored, and then had to sit on the sidewalk for a bit and just think about it. I mean, literally sat on the sidewalk. I was like, okay, I'm just going to take this in. But I knew at that point from the audition process that that Thor and Loki were going to be two really exciting characters that Chris Hemsworth and I were going to be able to create together. And yeah, it was just felt like the sky's the limit in a way, because the material was so rich, and I couldn't wait to get started. I couldn't wait to excavate the character and the story. I knew who was going to be an antagonist initially. I knew he was going to be a complicated and complex antagonist. This was not something anyone was aiming. We were aiming at depth and multi-dimensionality, and pathos. I think is that every villain is a hero in his own mind, and most villains become villains because their choices are misguided, and sometimes in stories you just don't hear from the perspective of the villain. You hear from the perspective of the hero, and I knew Kenneth Branagh and Kevin Feige and I knew that we were going to try and create some heartbreak and vulnerability in him, and so that people could understand that if he had what could be construed as kind of any malevolent intention, it was all born out of a wellspring of grief and grievance and vulnerability and damage, and that we had to create a legible and deep legend of that pain. Yeah. We had to really write it, and so that was the beginning. So it was a long answer.
No, yeah, and I feel like as a performer too, the beginning of a journey, especially as Marvel Studios is they're building this thing, and I'm sure they brought you on and they're like, we got the Avengers coming, and you're a young performer at that time. You know that there's this monstrous, mission ahead of you. And
I didn't know about it.
So you didn't know doing
I remember
Thor.
I was cast as Loki in Thor. I thought this is going to be amazing. I've never ever in my life had an opportunity like this to play a character of this dimension on this canvas. I'd seen Iron Man. I loved it. This was the next one. I thought, oh my goodness, I'm going to be allowed to play on the field with these people. And I heard that Anthony Hopkins was going to play Odin, and Rene Russo was going to play Frigga, and Natalie Portman was playing. And these were actors I respected for a long time. I thought, wow, I'm going to dance with these legends, or try to. And then I remember going for a costume fitting with Alexandra Byrne, who was the costume designer for Thor and the first Avengers in Los Angeles, and because they were obviously very elaborate costumes, and they were going to be. We were trying to create something very three-dimensional from a two-dimensional image of a comic book. And somebody at the office, the production office, said, oh, Kevin Feige would love just to say hello to you in the office. And I hadn't seen him in person since he'd that phone call. And we sat there, and he was so gentle and so kind of ordinary about it. He said, hey, Tom, come in here. Listen, this is going to be great. We're so excited. Ken's already working away. We've got the best team. So congratulations on Thor. We're so happy to have you. Can I talk to you about Avengers? And I was like, what?
So he was like your
And he
Nick
was like,
Fury.
yeah, he was. I was like, what? And he went, well, we're going to do a Captain America, and then we're going to make an Avengers film. And the first edition of the first Avengers comic in the 60s was Loki against all of them, and we want to mirror that in the movies, and we would love you to do it. And I was like, what? Okay, so it took a while to understand that there was a bigger plan. But it was, another great day.
Yeah.
Lucky me.
I mean, here's my dorky question, because you're beginning a journey like that. If you could time travel back there as yourself now, having understood the entire journey, and give yourself advice back then as you're starting that journey, what would it be?
Hold on tight. I don't know, actually. That's a really good question. If I could give myself advice back then, like, don't stop working. Keep going.
Yeah.
Because it would be encouragement in a way, like the things you're thinking about in terms of building this character. Keep going, because it's all gonna pay off at some point. And yeah, I think it was really good that I was probably quite innocent in lots of ways. I didn't understand. I couldn't have understood. I don't think any of us did. What the extraordinary impact that Marvel Studios was going to have on culture and movies, and it's been a roller coaster. So yeah, I think I'll stick with my initial response, which is hold on tight. Yeah.
Was there a moment, and I always feel like villains in some movies are secondary. They're there to kind of fuel the heroes, to help the heroes grow and learn, and But I always felt like Loki was different from the start, and people were obsessed and loved Loki and wanted to see more and more Loki. Do you remember a moment where you realized, like, whoa, like this is, yeah, I'm the villain, but this is different. Like this, there's a fandom here for my character.
Well, actually, as you were speaking, then I remembered, and I want to really honor the memory of the late Don Payne, who was the screenwriter for the first Thor movie, and he's no longer with us. And I remember reading the draft of the first Thor movie, and there was so much pathos, there was so much humanity and vulnerability in this character, and he had poured. It was really amazing, the arc that he'd already drawn of this second son, a younger brother, who felt anyway marginalized within a family, an important family, a royal family, a family in a shining palace in the sky, and that then finding out that he was in fact not part of that family by blood, he was adopted, had created huge crisis of feeling and identity, and it's incredibly emotionally destabilizing. And that broken heart then hardened into something that was very dangerous. But by the time, in a way, he's the villain, there's already a really poignant journey that you go on. I hope. And it was all in the writing, and I feel extremely grateful to him that I think that some of those scenes, there's a scene in the first Thor movie where Loki finds out he's adopted, and it's a two-hander between myself and Anthony Hopkins, a beautifully written scene that just was a gift. And I think that vulnerability that's in that scene and the opportunity I had to play it became a kind of cornerstone for the character, that people, even if they could see that Loki was the villain, they could sort of understand his motivations. And I think in literature, those are the best depictions of villainy. Is it's almost that that the actions of the villain, the choices of the villain, are not morally right, but at least you can understand why. You can empathize with the reasons why. So my respect to Don Payne in this moment.
So we're making our way through the films, and we get to Avengers Infinity War, which I love that film. and Loki dies in the opening, and it felt like such a culmination of that character, like that finally he had been so selfish and now he was selfless. You know, when you saw that and you saw that coming, were you like, all right, I think this is it, this is the end, finally the end of my journey here?
I really did. And I remember a meeting with Kevin Feige before we started filming Thor Ragnarok, the third Thor movie. And they were pitching me the story, going, it's going to be like this, and you know, Thor's going to go on this journey, and there's suddenly a sister involved, and Hela, and Valkyrie, and all those things. And at the end of that meeting, Joe and Anthony Russo came in, and they told me the story of that scene. So before I started Ragnarok, I knew where we were going. And yeah, it was like final whistle, full time. You know, that's it. But in a moving way, and I remember in the writing of that scene too, just before he tries to confront Thanos, he's giving a kind of almost like he's trying to buy himself time, a speech, and he refers to himself. He says, "I, Prince of Asgard, I, Loki of Jotunheim, Prince of Asgard, Odin's son," and that he refers to himself in Thor's presence as an Odin son. It felt like the final conclusion to the Odin son saga, at least, of this painful relationship, but also this very loving relationship, and this extraordinary story about the two of them as brothers and fathers and sons and all that stuff, and sacrificing himself as an Odin son felt really right. But yes, it was, I sent an email to everybody at Marvel. They sent me a card and said, come and see us anytime. You'll always be part of the family. Tears were shed.
Little did you know that there was another variant out there of Loki that had more story.
Yeah, we were shooting Avengers Endgame, and I didn't, obviously he was in it for 3 seconds, and but I was like, okay, so I pick up the Tesseract, but where's he go? And everyone's like, well. So it was, it was really interesting. Suddenly, it was like, okay, so maybe I'll, maybe the tears were the goodbye notes were, I don't know, they can be put in the shredder.
Yeah, well, and what's that like as a performer to get this opportunity after spending all of this time with the character, culminating in what you felt like was his finale, and then saying, okay, now we're going to take the character, we're going to rewind back to like where he was at the Avengers, and now you're going to start playing him again on this other journey. Like, how exciting was that for you? And like, what did you say to yourself? Like, okay, now this is my time that I finally get to explore this. When it comes to Loki.
Well, it was so exciting because I remember speaking to Kevin Feige and Stephen Broussard, another executive at Marvel in London, and they were presenting me with a sort of an idea of where they thought it would go. And Kevin was absolutely adamant. He was like, "Endgame is the beginning. We begin there because everyone wants to know where he went. Picked up the cube, disappeared in a puff of smoke. Where, when, how, what happened?" And then they introduced the idea of the TVA, this institution that claims to govern the unfolding of reality and the order of time, and that we could tell a story about order and chaos, Loki being the chaos, but also about identity, and confront Loki with who he is, like this seemingly, this weighty and almost invincible institution was just going to confront him he was just a number, with the reality of who he was. And we could start to dig into the things I found really great about the character, psychological stuff, this purpose, meaning, and identity. And it was just really exciting. And the only thing I said was, I don't want to break him. If we're going again, we have to carry with us everything that's gone before, but also refresh and renew and rethink and redefine and reinvigorate. And I knew that balance was going to be on me. And they said, 100%, we're with you. So it was almost like, even though the character I was going back in time as the character, it was like, well, we have to, I didn't want to just reheat the other meal, you know. I wanted to like make a new meal with different ingredients that people were like, this is from the same restaurant, we like this.
But it's got more depth to it, and more feelings. I don't know.
Because I think I knew that the audience would know. I knew that it felt like I was kind of just repeating and reheating. That would be, nobody would be interested in that. It was like, well, we've done that. So it had to be new, but we had to honor and carry with us what had come before. And then I met Michael Waldron, and we had an extraordinary couple of breakfasts actually in Los Angeles. We just like seemed to have breakfast for 10 hours, where I was kind of bringing him up to speed on, this is Michael Waldron was the head writer on season 1, bringing him up to speed on what I loved about the character and what I thought was interesting. And he'd written a pilot by then. And the pilot actually contained this 25-page scene between Loki and Mobius where all they did was talk. And he was like, I don't know if the studio's going to go for this. And I was like, more of this. This is rich. This is interesting. Mobius is a great character. It feels like he's undergoing the most intense and most rigorous psychological, analytical interrogation that he is finding very difficult to resist. And Mobius is completely different from any character he's ever come across. He's not like Odin. He's not like Thor. So we kind of dug into that stuff, and then we were off to the races. And it was Kate Herron jumped on board, and she had these extraordinary ideas about where to take it, and the idea of Sylvie, and being confronted with another version, another variant, another soul, not the same soul. And once we had those ingredients of the story, we were off to the races, telling a story about identity, really, which I hope we can all relate to, that the multiplicity of identity, that within all of us we contain multitudes. And I think that's really true of actors. And that's why we act, I think, is that we have the capacity to feel everything. And that different characters, you're almost like you've got a sort of sound desk and you're turning up different dials, like more of this, less of this. And that Loki, who seemed so certain of who he was, such clarity of purpose, such arrogance, is actually confronted with the fact that he thinks he knows everything, he finds out he knows nothing. And then he starts from a place of doubt. And any character who's doubtful is usually riveting to watch. Very painful for the character. Then they're on a search. They're on a search to know, to understand. And we had these great references. Kate Herron had these great references about kind of Kafka-esque nightmare that Loki finds himself in. The kind of the oppression of bureaucracy, that actually he's just a number. And he just is going to be consigned to the archives and made completely insignificant, which for Loki is not an easy thing to think about.
But it opens up something else, I think, inside of him.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people love the bromance that you have going with Owen Wilson in this series. I think in both season 1 and season 2, I think it's exceptional. And talk about finding that chemistry with him through both seasons, really, and just how you develop that alongside of him, because prior to that, you're with the Avengers, you're with all these really big actors, and now you're with a jet ski salesman, who, yes, is played by the great Owen Wilson, but it's a very different character. And I thought right from the go, you guys just were like that. And how did you find that?
Well, Owen is the best, and he is absolutely magnificent as Mobius. And the way Michael Waldron had created Mobius was that there was absolutely a template for a character across the table from Loki who didn't judge him, was dispassionate about him, was kind of a fan. Because look at you go, in the Time Theater, he's almost like a professor of Loki. He's sort of an academic who's like someone studying an animal in the wild, or an animal, and suddenly in books, and then suddenly seeing an animal in the wild, it's like, wow, this is really happening in front of me. And so there's almost an academic detachment that he's not emotionally engaged in Loki's drama. He can't be pulled into Loki's manipulations. He's almost excited by it and detached, but also able to sit without judgment. And I think no one has been able to see Loki without judging or condemning or somehow getting emotionally entangled. And to your point about Owen, he came in we made the first season in 2020, and we were in prep a couple of weeks before we started filming. And he was like, so I'm an expert in Loki. So Tom, I better talk to you about Loki then, so I know what you know. And we had this extraordinary afternoon in a meeting room at the studio with a TV, and we kind of like speed watched all of my performances. Very grateful to him for. But he was really interested in what he loved about it. He loved it. He loved all the stories when they were sincere, and he loved the sincerity of it when we were kind of the commitment of like these emotional truths. And then at the end of it, he was like, "Tom, what do you love about Loki?" And I was like, "That's a great question." And I heard myself say, "He just has so much range, and he's the god of mischief. He's also the god of chaos, but he's kind of also the god of misunderstood pain, and he's got so much charm, and so much grief, and so much playfulness, and so much damage." And I said, it's like a piano. There's 88 keys, and he's playing the light, twinkling notes at the top, which sound charming and playful, but he's also playing the heavy keys about grief and loss and anger and sadness and loneliness. And he was like, I might use that. And then in the first episode of season 1, he says, you see, I can play the heavy keys too. And he was just he's so intelligent, so brilliant. His capacity to make things up on the spot, and he's just got such a natural charm. We just kind of got into it. We love the same things about the characters. It's really interesting. Like everyone says, the Mobius and Loki dynamic is, they always use the word fun, which I always say is a huge compliment. But actually, if you analyze the scenes, they're never like having fun.
Yeah.
They're
on a mission. There's something happened.
Well, on a mission, but they're passionately disagreeing.
Yeah.
They're like really passionately debating something, and they're locked in a kind of ideological disagreement always, about where Sylvie is, about what to do about time slipping, about Cracker Jacks in 1893. It's always like they're having a kind of argument, and I think there's a real charm. We love playing the argument because they recognize each other and they see each other, but it's all about working together. So yeah, he's great.
I mean, and talk about season 2. I mean, what did I don't know how much, as you were making season 1, did you know where season 2 was going to end up, but what did you want to further explore with the character in season 2? I mean, what I love about season 2 is that it's just got this momentum to it. There's an urgency to it. Every episode, everything's falling apart around us. We have to figure it out. And I think it moves, it zips, but what did you want? And I know you also executive produced the season. What did you want to get out further, tell about this character?
It's so interesting because the fact that it's about time has always been incredibly stimulating for me. And this extraordinary and painful disagreement Loki has with Sylvie at the end of season 1, that they don't see things the same way. And these are two characters who've never been able to trust and never been able to be trusted, and they betray each other, and it's very painful for both of them. And I think hopefully you see that at the end of season 1, that he's just completely grief-stricken. And then Mobius and Hunter B-15 don't recognize him, and that makes him panic, because there's a statue of He Who Remains in the atrium, whereas it used to be the Timekeepers. So something's happened to time. And Eric Martin, who was on the writing team in season 1, but then became the head writer of season 2, he used to talk about I mean, we were already thinking about it as we were wrapping. Like the last 3 weeks of season 1, we were already talking about what we were going to do. Kevin Wright, the producer, Erik, and myself. And Erik always said, if season 1 is about Loki learning who he is, season 2 is about Loki learning how to lead. And then I just kept thinking about time, and I actually gave him, I know some, I think Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead have talked about this, or Dan DeLue, who directed episode 2, and also Natalie Holt, our composer. I started thinking about, there's this, you will know it, a truly great piece of literature, the poems of T.S. Eliot, the 4 Quartets. And the poem opens with this line: time present and time past are both perhaps present in time future, and time future contained in time past. And I told Erik this line. And I was like, interpret that how you will. Because in a way, Sylvie's execution, or Sylvie putting a blade through He Who Remains, breaks time. It breaks the sacred timeline. It unleashes the multiverse. And so suddenly we were thinking about what are the stakes about what's happened to time, the nature of reality. And somehow Loki's got to try and figure it out. And if what He Who Remains said is true, which is that there are many more versions of him coming to start a war between universes, that we should all be very afraid, and that he's suddenly consumed by a mission to make sure that it doesn't happen. But I also said at the end of the Eliot poem is a line, "We shall not cease from exploration." This is Little Gidding is the final quartet. And the last, or the penultimate, I can't remember, towards the very end of the poem reads, "We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time." Which is an extraordinary piece of writing. And I also had that ringing in my head going, we've got to finish this, and we must, this is all really general. This is, we had a long process of development, but it was still just ideas to chase as we were going into development. And this idea of time being circular, because memory is also circular, and as you say, this ticking clock momentum, this extraordinary urgency that something is broken and may need fixing. And this may be a good point per your question to talk about. I remember I was in the writer's room, terrific room, led by Kevin Wright, our producer, and Eric Martin. And also present was Kasra Farahani, our extraordinary production designer whose work is just magnificent. And Kasra directed episode 3 of season 2 as well. And it was really valuable having his creative input in the room. He was also he built the TVA from his brain. He's brilliant. And we were in the room and we were just sort of blue sky thinking where we go. And we were talking about glorious purpose. This line from Avengers: Loki arrives on Earth from space, and I look at Nick Fury, played by Samuel L. Jackson, and I say, I am Loki of Asgard, and I am burdened with glorious purpose. And it's really entitled and pompous and arrogant and hubristic. And we all know where that goes. It's not so glorious, and he loses. And then in episode 1 of season 1, through his interrogation with Mobius, he learns that glorious purpose was fraudulent, was completely devoid of meaning, that he was born to lose. And so he's someone who's always carried this engine of entitlement. This is what I deserve, and this is what I'm owed. And it's revealed to be completely meaningless. And so he's given a second chance. And then we started thinking about, okay, also, we have to keep interrogating what his glorious purpose. We have a chance for Loki to redefine what purpose is. And similarly, in a mirror, which was really fascinating to all of us and to the cast, was the TVA is now compromised. And all these people who work there Mobius, B-15, Casey, Renslayer. You meet OB in this season as well. But everyone at the TVA has suddenly realized that they were living a lie, that the TVA is in fact not a benevolent institution. It's actually kind of morally ambiguous, even malevolent, that they were doing the bidding of some wizard dictator who was keeping, the timeline going, and they were actually stopping life from being lived. And that's Sylvie's argument. Sylvie's argument is like, let free will dictate, let free will lead the way. Everyone across every universe should be allowed to live the life they choose to live and not be policed by the TVA. So everyone at the TVA is having a kind of existential crisis about the TVA's purpose. And so the whole season became this, as we were thinking about it, a really fascinating way of exploring what purpose means for every individual and what purpose means for institutions. And if institutions are revealed to be broken, should they be destroyed or can they be rebuilt? And the argument really across season 2 between Loki and Sylvie is Sylvie's like, burn it down. The TVA was bad it was toxic and oppressive from the beginning. Like, burn it down. Let free will thrive. And Loki's argument is, well, maybe we can find a way to make it work so that people like He Who Remains and his variants don't get to control it. And it became an interesting metaphor in a way about the value of institutions, but also totally wedded to Loki and his new curiosity, his new drive, a very deep drive in him to find meaning. Because on the timeline, there was no meaning. He was a bad apple, and he made bad choices, and he hurt people, and he lost. And he's been given this second chance. So he's like, well, how can I find a way to redefine purpose for himself? And I hope that, the season finale just came out on Thursday, but I hope that the finale answers that question and echoes through the whole journey that I've been on with the character, that it's really been, how do I find meaning? How do I find purpose? And the answer is not where he expected it to be. And the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know we have to wrap it up, and I know, but you do have to ask though. And
we can do 10 more minutes, right? We could,
yeah, for sure.
Sorry, I feel like we literally just got started.
Well, then I could ask my time slipping question, because I love every single time Loki time slips, you have the same kind of, you stand back, you throw your hair back, and I think it's marvelous. How many times did you have to do that?
Many times.
Many
times. Time slipping was like trying to, because also we had to invent time slipping. Like, I can't actually time slip. And I remember reading it. Erik had created this extraordinary thing, this extraordinary problem in a way. It's almost like a symptom of the system of time has been fractured at the beginning of season 2. And Eric Martin created this idea of time slipping that actually it's destabilized Loki's anchor in time. He's anchored in space, but he's not anchored in time. Like, I know I am here now. I'm anchored in space, I'm anchored in time. Loki's often here then, or in the future. And I was reading it going, this is so fun. And there was all these conversations he was trying to have with people, and then he would be sort of whisked away to another time, and people would be like, where did he go? And then I realized in pre-production I was going to have to do it. And nobody had really delineated that for,
What does that look like?
So I had to come up with it, and it was like I then started to think of it being a painful experience. I was like, what would it mean if you were at a particular and molecular level disassembled and then reassembled somewhen else? I was like, that would be really painful. And so it also became, in almost, if the hero's journey is one of often confrontation and suffering, I knew it was going to be an interesting engine for the story. And it would be very frustrating. Imagine if we were in the middle of a conversation and I just disappeared and I had stuff to say. You'd be like, where did he go? Yeah. He's just like hung up the phone, And I'd be like, I was going to tell you this great thing. Anyway, so yeah, it was an interesting thing of creating actually just huge amounts of tension physically in the body on my own. Like I was kind of like being sort of stretched without anyone stretching me, and then overlaying different versions of it, so it is really all me. I can say that. Like, of course, I'm magnificently aided by the visual effects department, but they're essentially different. Every time my Loki time slips, it's me doing different physical and sort of contortions, and then we pull frames out and overlay them very quickly together, so it looks like he's kind of flying around in space-time. Yeah. I needed a lot of stretching.
I think the finale of the show is brilliant. It's maybe my favorite episode of television that Marvel has produced. It's great. I'm a time travel nerd. How much fun was it to revisit some of those scenes, to kind of go back and replay them and go back into moments that had played out in season 1 and identifying those moments? And that's got to be a unique task too, as a performer, to kind of go and now be back in that moment and figure out where I was in that moment.
It was really fascinating, and we really had to synchronize watches as a team to make sure everyone was on the same page, because there's a lot of room for confusion. But it was so thrilling. Basically, there's a scene. It's a scene at the end of episode 4 of season 2, where the whole team, Loki, Mobius, Sylvie, OB, Casey, Victor Timely, B-15, they're all in this temporal core control room looking out at the loom, and they think they've cracked it. They've got a plan. It's going to work, and it doesn't. And then they're all consumed by some sort of temporal energy explosion. And I think it's surprising as a viewer when spoilers, sorry, spoiler alert. I think it's surprising. And then in the finale, knowing that that Loki he's learnt to control the time slipping. And I think the last line of episode 5 is, I can rewrite the story. It's almost like he's redrafting it. He's redrafting reality every time, choosing to go back. Okay, and then failing and failing and failing again. It's kind of like that Samuel Beckett quote, ever tried, ever failed, fail again, fail better. I think he's in this process of redrafting and re-editing the sort of document of reality and adjusting things. But we were in that set for about 2 weeks, and we played the scene, obviously, the first scene very straight, full of sincerity, full of emotion. And then we kept going back and doing these redrafts. And because, of course, every other actor, Owen Wilson, Sophia DiMartino, Ke Huy Quan, Eugene Cordero, Jonathan Majors, and Wumi Masaku, had to play the same, this has never happened before, emotion. But I was running around doing these different things, and I think they were like, is Tom okay? I think he seems a little stressed. But I was, of course, like, sometimes I was inventing different ways of doing things in the moment. But it was so fun to see and to play Loki getting a grip on this affliction. That time slipping starts being an affliction, some painful symptom of a problem, but then later it becomes a power, like becomes an ability. It becomes something he's skilled at. And I loved playing that. And there was a huge opportunity for sort of I think it's very playful anyway, in the mischief of it, and I think magnificently cut together and shot by Justin Benson and Erin Moorhead. They were absolutely amazing.
Brilliant.
As they were so forensic and so precise about making sure we were all on a straight line, and also having fun with it too. I think it is fun.
And the score too.
Natalie Holt her contribution to all of this is absolutely amazing. I remember hearing a suite of composition that she had put together before coming onto the show for season 1, and it was just perfect. It was theatrical, it was grand, it was playful, it was declamatory, it was ornate, it was refined, it was charming, it was Loki, basically. It was just perfect music. And in the right places, it was deeply, deeply poignant. And I think, she's built upon her own extraordinary contribution from season 1 and really, really done some extraordinary work, which I'm very grateful for, because, it helps us all. And then, the episode, the finale takes this turn, I think, into something I hope very moving. No. I hesitate to say that because I hesitate to tell anyone how to feel about something, but I find it very moving, and it's certainly, the experience of filming it was very moving, because the last thing I say, and I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it, I know you have, but if in case this gets out, the last line the character says to Mobius and Sylvie is a quotation, or part of a quotation from an earlier iteration. And I hope it honors the circularity that it's a familiar refrain, but it means a different thing. So it's like the same but different.
And I mean, in terms of the endings that Loki has seen, and I know we don't want to spoil the ending for this, but how do you feel? Do you feel like do you feel like you find the glorious purpose of playing Loki, and that where he ends up at the end of season 2 feels complete? And as bittersweet as it is.
Talking about the first story, the first screenplay, the Don Payne's first depiction of Loki, he is a prince who is told as a child that he was worthy of love, and his journey is that not explicitly told, that I hasten to add, in case people are like, he never says that, but he and then the journey is one of enormous destabilization, marginalization, pain, damage, suffering, solitude, loneliness, and grievance. And I think it comes back around in a way that I always saw Loki as a broken soul, but a soul intact before it was broken. And I wanted to find a way back to heal that soul. And I hope we've achieved that with the finale.
I think so. Well,
never said that before.
Ladies and gentlemen, I mean, the show is Loki. If you like it, tell all your friends about it. And Tom Hiddleston, thank you very much. I do want to add, Tom's got to run, so if everybody could just stay in their seat for a minute while Tom just runs out of here. Thank you very much, and appreciate you all being here.
Can I just say thank you all so much for being here, for listening to me. Thank you, Erik, for your amazing questions. I really appreciate it. Thank you.